Story of the hour. Despite Trump administration's justification, the chat leak over Signal continues to simmer. Now, the latest development that makes the headlines, it sparked debates on its implications. Now, Senator Tom Cotton has issued a strong defense of Pete Hegseth amidst the ongoing Signal leak controversy that has shaken the Trump administration. Meanwhile, Jerry Vance expressed concerns in a chat, noting that the president's action may conflict with his message on Europe and could risk a spike in oil prices. Despite his disagreement, he ultimately supported the action, telling Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth that if he thinks we should do it, let's go. He just hates bailing Europe out again. This raises a poignant question. Do Trump and Vance share a common position on Yemen? Additionally, the U.S. judge that President Donald Trump has argued should be impeached for blocking his use of wartime powers to deport Venezuelan migrants is set to hear a new lawsuit. The lawsuit concerns administration officials' use of messaging app Signal to share highly sensitive military plans. In a separate development, the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has addressed the issue of including a journalist in a group chat about military strikes, stating this can't happen again. Let's hear what he said.
There was no war plans on there. This was a sort of description of what we could inform our counterparts around the world when the time came to do so. Again, look, I think the White House is looking at this entire thing. How did that journalist get on there? Why was this the appropriate? And I think there'll be reforms and changes made, so this was not going to happen again. It can't.
The U.S. President Donald Trump has dismissed the controversy surrounding the leaked plans for airstrikes in Yemen, calling it a quote-unquote witch hunt. He also defended his embattled Pentagon Chief despite growing calls from Democrats for his resignation. Listen in to what he said.
Secretary Hegseth consider his position over the Signal.
Hegseth is doing a great job. He had nothing to do with this. Hegseth. How do you bring Hegseth into it? He had nothing to do. Look, it's all a witch hunt.
The U.S. Director of National Intelligence, along with the heads of the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, and the DNI, testified before the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence about the worldwide threats. The U.S. Representative Raja Krishnamurthy has strongly criticized the Trump administration and called for Hegseth's resignation. Listen in to what he said.
This is classified information. It's a weapon system, as well as sequence of strikes, as well as details about the operations. And so I think that, just piggybacking off of what some other members have said, using the DOD's manual as well as the executive order in operation today with the Trump administration, this text message is clearly classified information. Secretary Hegseth has disclosed military plans as well as classified information. He needs to resign immediately. He needs to resign immediately, and a full investigation needs to be undertaken with regard to whether other similar signal chats are occurring in this administration.
There are no texts discussing war plans, no units, no locations, no routes, no flight paths, no sources, no methods, no classified information, is what the U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has said, downplaying the significance of the leaked messages. Listen in to what Hegseth had to say.
Nobody's texting war plans. Well, I noticed this morning, out came something that doesn't look like war plans. And as a matter of fact, they even changed the title to attack plans, because they know it's not war plans. There's no units, no locations, no routes, no flight paths, no sources, no methods, no classified information. You know who sees war plans? I see them every single day. I looked at them this morning. I looked at attack plans this morning.
President Trump and top U.S. intelligence officials are now scrambling to contain the fallout from the scandal after a journalist was inadvertently added to a group chat discussing airstrikes on Yemen's Houthi rebels. It was a mistake that a reporter was unintentionally included in a Signal chat with high-level national security officials, is what Tulsi Gabbard, Trump's director of national intelligence, said, who was also part of that group chat.
National Security Advisor has taken full responsibility for this, and the National Security Council is conducting an in-depth review along with technical experts working to determine how this reporter was inadvertently added to this chat. The conversation was candid and sensitive, but as the President National Security Advisor stated, no classified information was shared. There were no sources, methods, locations, or war plans that were shared. This was a standard update to the National Security Cabinet that was provided alongside updates that were given to foreign partners.
All right, let's start this conversation. Joining me on the telecast right now is Ross Feingold. He's a political risk analyst. Ross, it has been a heck of a week with this entire explosive revelation being brought forth by the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic. He has released the full transcription of the chats just a day ago, and it seems like the saving grace for the Republicans, for the Director of National Intelligence and the Defense Secretary and the National Security Advisor, and all of them coming together talking about whether it was a war plan whose details had been leaked mistakenly or an attack plan. This is the fallback that the Trump administration and its officials and its national security team is falling back on.
That's right. They're going to insist that there was no classified information. And as some of the video clips showed, the talking point is to say there was no sources or methods, no specific military units were mentioned, specific timing. So they're going to continue to emphasize that and hope that this blows over pretty quickly. Chances are this is going to blow over quickly, if for no other reason that there's a Republican majority in both the House and the Senate, and they're unlikely to initiate very in-depth investigations of the White House or the president's national security team.
Right, absolutely. And the kind of backlash that the Atlantic editor-in-chief is facing at the hands of President Trump and Pete Hegseth and other of the associates in the Trump administration, nobody seems to be giving him credit for not having released this information before the attacks happened. What if he had done that? What would have happened then?
Oh, that's an interesting hypothetical question. Apparently, he did realize that he was a party to a very sensitive conversation. And in fact, when they first published this story on Monday of this week, they only included very limited details. But then the interesting thing was, with these national security officials testifying that the information was not classified, then the Atlantic felt fine. If you're saying it's not classified, we're going to publish screenshots of the entire thing. So it's kind of humorous how that worked out in the end. But again, I do think that Republicans in Congress are going to stand by President Trump and his national security team. So chances are this is going to blow over within a few days.
Do you think there are going to be any resignations that are going to be issued at this point of time? Is Pete Hegseth going to resign? Is Mike Waltz going to step down?
That's up to one person, the boss, President Donald Trump. If President Trump wants these people to resign, he'll ask for their resignation, or he'll just fire them. But chances are he's not going to do that. He wants to stand by his team. It's a new team. They've only been in office for 2 months. And President Trump also has the experience from his first term where his relationships with the defense secretary, with the national security advisor, weren't ideal, and he had to change people multiple times. He's trying to avoid that in his second term. That's why in selecting his team, whether that's for domestic policy or foreign policy, he emphasized loyalty to President Trump is a very important factor. And I think it's safe to say that President Trump has the team that he wants. He doesn't have a team that the Republican establishment pushed onto him. It's the team he wanted, and I think he's going to be very reluctant to change the team.
But do you think it is justified for President Trump or the national security team that an FBI inquiry is not set up, as has been the demand of the Democrats through and through?
Again, President Trump doesn't want to penalize his team, and that's the choice he's going to make. And if he makes that choice, then we're not going to see an FBI investigation. It's not clear why an FBI investigation would be needed anyway, because the possibility of bringing criminal charges against the National Security Advisor, Michael Waltz, is extraordinarily remote. I just don't see the Department of Justice or the FBI going in that direction, especially with President Trump strongly supporting the National Security Advisor up to now.
You know, I do have to mention, during the Senate hearing that was taking place yesterday, and a question was posed to Ratcliffe, who is the CIA director, the interrogator actually went ahead and questioned him and asked whether Pete Hegseth was actually drunk. at the time of having that conversation with the rest of the members of the Signal chat. Do you think it was in keeping with the decorum of the interrogation that was taking place, of the hearing that was taking place? Also, when Hegseth was appointed by President Trump, there were insinuations cast against him that he is more of a yes man to Donald Trump, and that's his claim to fame, and that's his claim to getting that plum job, and got nothing to do with his experience, because he's a former Fox News host.
That was a very odd question. In fact, I think that was a waste of time to ask that question. There's no way the other people who were part of this Signal chat would know whether or not Secretary of Defense Hegseth had been drinking at the time he wrote those messages. So I think it was a bit silly and a waste of time to ask that question. But again, getting back to the relationship between Hegseth and President Trump is emphasizing loyalty to President Trump as an important factor in who he selected for his team. And Hegseth fits that. He's very loyal to President Trump, and President Trump is happy. So I don't think President Trump is going to be eager to make any changes to the team.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for joining me on the telecast, sharing your views.